The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with an unusual tension, an undercurrent of unease rippling through the representatives from every corner of the galaxy. For millennia, the Council had presided over a universe of diverse species, each with their own distinct histories and power dynamics. But today, there was an unmistakable shift in the air, a shift that was now focused squarely on Earth's representative, Captain Lila Hart. The debate had begun as usual, with accusations flying from the Zelther Dominion and the Iskarians of the Core Worlds. Talk of planetary resources, territorial disputes, and the Tharnian Empire's latest attempts at expansion filled the room. But the moment Captain Hart stepped into the center of the chamber, the conversation halted. In her hands, she held a small, sleek creature, unlike anything seen in the room before. It was a beast, an apex predator, the likes of which had earned a fearsome reputation across the galaxy. Towering nearly 3 meters tall, its body was a mass of sinewy muscle covered in jagged, obsidian-black armor plates. A pair of long, sinuous tails flicked behind it, each tipped with barbed spikes. Its 4 eyes glowed a deep, unsettling crimson, and its fangs, sharper than the deadliest blades, were always visible in a permanent snarl. It was called a Rilax, one of the most feared and deadly creatures in the known universe. On every world that had encountered it, its mere presence had been enough to incite terror. Rilaxes were hunters, predators of the highest order, known to leave entire colonies in ruins. The creature in Hart's arms, however, was calm, curled up like a domestic cat, its once menacing appearance reduced to something almost docile. The council members stared, a mix of confusion, disbelief, and fear clouding their features. "Captain Hart," began Zelther, his insectoid antennae twitching. "What is that thing? And why is it here?" Lila's expression remained calm, unwavering. She gently ran her hand over the Rilax's armored back. To anyone familiar with such creatures, the gesture was unimaginable. The room watched in stunned silence, some species frozen in horror, others trying to comprehend what was happening before them. "This," Lila said, her voice steady and measured, "is an example of what humanity has learned to do, live with what others consider impossible." Her words were simple, but the effect they had was profound. The room was still, every eye locked on her, and the predator that should have been tearing through the chamber, not sitting calmly at her feet. "How are you able to tame such a creature?" asked a representative from the shore call, a species known for their advanced knowledge of genetic manipulation. The Rilax is a violent and solitary hunter, unmatched in its predatory instincts. Lila smiled faintly. "We didn't tame it. We simply understood it. Humans have always thrived in environments where others faltered, whether it's our ability to adapt to harsh conditions or to find common ground with the most unlikely of creatures. This Rilax isn't a pet, it's an ally. We've shared a bond with it through mutual respect and understanding." A low hum of murmurs rippled through the chamber. The idea of bonding with a creature so feared, so dangerous, was beyond anything the council had ever encountered. There was a hesitance in the air, a sense that the room was grappling with a reality that didn't fit their understanding of the universe. "Why?" questioned the Iskarian ambassador, a race known for their rigidly ordered society. "Why would humanity choose to ally with a creature so dangerous?" "Because," Lila replied, "sometimes the most dangerous creatures have something to teach us." The Rilax hunts not out of malice but necessity. It understands survival, strategy, and strength. In understanding that, we've found common ground. The room fell silent again. The idea of a species that could not only survive but thrive alongside a predator of such fearsome power was unfathomable to most. But the evidence stood before them. A calm Rilax, nestled comfortably in Lila's arms, purring softly, almost as if it were a pet rather than a conqueror. One by one, the council members began to speak again, but this time with a different tone, one tinged with reluctant awe. What Lila had done, or perhaps what humanity had done, was no small feat. The Rilax was a symbol, not just of Earth's resilience, but of its capacity to see opportunity where others saw danger. "You see," Lila continued, her voice cutting through the murmurs. We didn't come to the table with power alone. We came with understanding. And that, she paused, letting the words settle, is something you can't fight with weapons. The apex predator in her arms shifted slightly, as if on cue, and for a brief moment, every eye in the chamber was riveted on it. Its presence, no longer threatening, now seemed almost symbolic. Humanity had done the unthinkable, what the galaxy had written off as impossible, and in doing so, they had shifted the very nature of diplomacy itself. The silence in the chamber stretched on, broken only by the occasional whisper of awe or disbelief. The Galactic Council had seen many things in its time: political maneuvering, endless battles for supremacy, and species too proud to cooperate. But nothing could prepare them for the calm humanity had introduced, the possibility of peaceful coexistence with one of the galaxy's deadliest creatures. Lila Hart set the Rilax down gently on the floor, and it padded toward the far side of the chamber, its eyes still glowing faintly, but its demeanor far from threatening. The once feared predator now merely observed, as if sensing the shift in the room's energy. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. This was no longer a room full of embattled diplomats. It was a room of species realizing that Earth, with its capacity to defy expectations, had just rewritten the rules of galactic diplomacy. And they were left to wonder, if humanity could tame the apex predator, what else could they accomplish? The council members remained silent as they observed the Rilax, now sitting quietly in a corner of the chamber, its piercing eyes scanning the room. There was an almost eerie calmness to the situation, as though the predator, once a symbol of destruction and fear, had become something else entirely. Humanity had done what no other species dared to even attempt. They had bridged the gap between terror and trust. One of the representatives, a tall and graceful species from the star system of Rilax, spoke first, her voice soft but laden with skepticism. Captain Hart, while we are impressed by your ability to coexist with such a beast, there's still much we do not understand. How can we trust that the Rilax, or any creature like it, will not turn on you when it is no longer useful? Lila's gaze remained unwavering, her calm demeanor undisturbed by the question. Trust doesn't come from a creature's obedience, she said, her voice steady. It comes from the respect we show one another. The Rilax understands the value of cooperation. It has no reason to turn against us, just as we have no reason to harm it. This isn't about control, it's about mutual respect. And yes, we've been fortunate enough to build that respect, but we know the risks. It's a partnership. The Rilax representative shifted uncomfortably, clearly not convinced, but the look in her eyes suggested a dawning realization. The human species, unpredictable and untamed in its own right, had found a way to engage with something even more dangerous than themselves and had not only survived, but thrived. It was a revelation that left many wondering just how far humanity could push the boundaries of what was possible. Another voice, this time from the cold, calculating Kelrith race, known for their advanced technological prowess, spoke up. So, you claim this bond is built on respect alone? That this creature's deadly nature is nothing more than a facade? It is a fool's gamble, Captain Hart. Lila's expression softened slightly, as though she had anticipated this challenge. No, it's not just respect. It's understanding. Humanity is a species that knows struggle. We have fought battles on every front, against nature, against enemies, and against ourselves. And we've learned one important thing. That which we do not understand, we must learn to respect, or we risk becoming as mindless as the threats we face. This Rilax is not a weapon to wield, it is a creature we've chosen to understand, just as we choose to understand each other. That's what makes us stronger. The Kelrith representative didn't respond immediately, but his narrowed eyes and twitching mandibles betrayed his intrigue. He was a being of logic, unaccustomed to such ideals. Yet, there was something undeniably captivating about Lila's words. For the first time, he wondered if perhaps, in this room, humanity was offering a perspective that the galaxy had long overlooked, the power of empathy and cooperation over conquest and dominance. The council chamber was still, and the atmosphere had changed. The tension from earlier had dissipated, replaced by something almost palpable, an unease mixed with a kind of reluctant admiration. Species who had once feared humanity's unpredictable nature were now beginning to see the potential of a species that could tame the fiercest creatures and, in the same breath, speak of unity and peace.
One by one, the representatives began to murmur among themselves. There was no immediate decision, no clear resolution. But Lila could see it in their eyes. Their worldviews were shifting. The human approach had broken the mold of intergalactic diplomacy. No longer was power defined solely by weapons or force. It could now be measured by something intangible, the ability to forge unlikely bonds. Lila stood tall, meeting each of their gazes with quiet confidence. You asked if we could trust the Rilax. Let me answer that. The question you should be asking is, can you trust humanity to lead with more than just strength? Because that's what we offer. We offer a future where we don't need to conquer, where we don't need to destroy, where the strongest aren't the ones with the biggest weapons, but the ones who know how to bring others together. The silence that followed was heavier than any battle cry. For the first time, the council members were no longer certain who held the power in the room. The Rilax, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, stood up and stretched, its muscular form rippling beneath the smooth black armor of its hide. It glanced at Lila, and for a brief moment, its eyes softened, the dangerous glow fading into something more contemplative. Then, without warning, it padded toward the exit, as though understanding that its part in this meeting was over. Its departure was graceful, not an ounce of menace left in its presence. Lila watched the creature leave, her heart steady. She knew the world outside the chamber would soon be watching closely. Humanity's position in the galaxy had just taken an unprecedented turn. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. The galaxy would never look at Earth, or the human race, the same way again. The fear that had once followed humanity into the halls of power was slowly being replaced by something much more dangerous to those who had thought themselves invincible: respect. As the doors slid closed behind the Rilax, the council began to speak again, but this time their voices were tinged with uncertainty. They had seen the unthinkable. A human, standing before the galaxy's most fearsome predator, had not only survived but had turned that predator into a symbol of what humanity could offer, a chance for change. And in that moment, the stars seemed a little closer to unity than they had ever been before. The murmurs in the council chamber grew louder as the representatives debated among themselves. Their words bounced off the cold, polished walls, but there was an unmistakable shift in the air. What had begun as a meeting to discuss human aggression and their apparent wildness was now turning into something much deeper, much more complex. The Rilax had left the room, but its presence lingered, an apex predator, reduced to little more than a symbol of cooperation and understanding. Captain Lila Hart stood quietly, her eyes moving across the faces of the council members. She felt their gazes, some skeptical, some filled with curiosity, others reflecting a grudging admiration. Humanity had always been the underdog in these galactic councils, often dismissed as naive, too emotional, too new to the stars to understand the intricacies of galactic politics. But today, something had changed. Lila could feel it in her bones. The Trellex representative, her long neck arched in thought, spoke again, her voice quieter this time. Perhaps we have misjudged you, Captain. Perhaps the galaxy is not bound solely by the laws of might and conquest. But can you and your species truly maintain this balance? Can you walk this delicate line between peace and power without tipping into chaos? Lila paused, choosing her words carefully. We are not perfect. We will falter, and there will be times when the old ways, war, dominance, seem like the only solution. But we've learned something. That to live, we must evolve. To evolve, we must learn to work together. And sometimes that means learning to coexist with things that are far more dangerous than we are. The chamber fell into a heavy silence. The Kelrith representative's eyes narrowed slightly, and for a brief moment, Lila thought he might challenge her words, but instead, he inclined his head ever so slightly. We have always believed that strength lies in control, in dominance. You may be right. But I still question whether humanity, so young, so unpredictable, can be trusted with such ideals. Lila understood the fear behind his skepticism. The Kelrith were a species built on logic, a race that had mastered technology to the point where their ships, their weapons, could obliterate entire fleets with a single thought. To them, the idea of letting go of control, of embracing a form of strength that wasn't absolute, wasn't grounded in absolute power, was a concept foreign and unsettling. I understand your doubt, Lila said,
her tone softer now. "We've been like that too. Always fighting, always seeking control. But what we've learned is that there is strength in vulnerability. Strength in knowing that we can survive without always having to dominate. I've seen it in the eyes of the Rilax. They are not simply machines of destruction. They have the capacity to grow just like we do. We've learned to respect that." The representative from the Zalrith, a species known for their extreme endurance and adaptability, leaned forward, his multifaceted eyes glinting with interest. "You speak of respect, of growth. But what happens when your respect is betrayed? What happens when the Rilax or another predator turns on you? Will your understanding be enough then?" Lila didn't flinch. "We will be ready, just as we are always ready. But that's the thing. We don't walk into the future expecting betrayal. We walk into it expecting possibility. Humanity isn't invincible. We've been knocked down time and again. But we stand up. And when we stand, we do so with the belief that we can change the course of things, even if we must do it one step at a time." The Zalrith representative grunted, clearly impressed, but not yet convinced. "You are speaking of ideals. We, too, have tried such ideals. Yet, when we were on the brink of extinction, ideals did not save us." Lila nodded, understanding the weight of his words. She could sense the deep scar that many species carried: wars, destruction, betrayals. But in her heart, she felt a spark of hope, a belief that what they were building could be the foundation of something greater. "I'm not asking you to believe in us just yet. I'm asking you to see the possibility that perhaps the galaxy does not have to be a battleground. That perhaps there is more strength in unity than in division." For a moment, the room was still, each representative lost in their own thoughts. The Rilax's sudden shift in behavior had rattled them all. No one had expected that, least of all the humans. The fear they once felt toward humanity, the notion that humans were unpredictable and dangerous, was slowly being replaced by something else, a deep, cautious curiosity. Lila glanced at the large viewing screen in the center of the chamber, where a map of the galaxy flickered softly. So many stars, so many worlds, each with its own history, its own struggle. The human race was just a small, in the vastness of it all. Yet they had proven something today. They had proven that they could stand before a galaxy filled with unknown dangers and offer something no one had expected: understanding. The silence stretched longer, but Lila didn't mind. It was the silence of 1,000 thoughts, the silence before the turning of a page. She could almost hear the first tentative steps of a new chapter unfolding. Finally, it was the Trellex representative who broke the silence. "I will propose a new session for tomorrow," she said, her tone more thoughtful than before. "We must discuss the implications of humanity's actions and how they could reshape the future. Perhaps there is something to this unity you speak of." Lila smiled, a small, quiet victory. "I look forward to it." And as the council began to slowly disperse, Lila remained, standing alone in the center of the room. She knew that their perceptions of humanity had changed, that they had seen what Earth could offer. Not through force, but through the willingness to stand beside the most dangerous of creatures, to pet the apex predator and turn it into a partner. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, humanity wasn't seen as a threat. They were seen as a force capable of change, capable of offering something different. And that was a future worth fighting for. As the representatives of the Galactic Council filed out, murmuring among themselves, Lila Hart remained standing in the center of the room, her mind buzzing with the implications of what had just transpired. The door to the chamber slid shut behind her, and the room fell into a quiet stillness. She took a deep breath, letting the weight of the moment settle over her. The task ahead was far from simple. The Council's decision to consider humanity's position in the galaxy was just the beginning. What would follow would be a delicate balance of diplomacy, strategy, and proving that humanity's ideals were not simply the dreams of a naive species, but the foundation for a new way of engaging with the galaxy. Lila's thoughts drifted to the Rilax. The apex predator had been the catalyst for change, but she knew that the true test was yet to come. The Rilax was a creature of war, its instincts sharpened over eons of survival. To have it now acting as a symbol of cooperation, its lethal form petted and pacified by a human hand, was a statement the galaxy had never seen before. It was a message that even the most savage of beings could be understood, respected, and even befriended. The Rilax's compliance in the face of such a display had left the Council in shock, but its behavior also suggested something deeper. Perhaps the creatures, like humanity, were capable of more than violence. Perhaps they, too, were waiting for a chance to break free of their own instincts and find another path. Lila wasn't naive enough to believe that all predators could be tamed, but she had seen the possibility that they could be respected, even if it was a difficult, slow process. The voices from earlier in the session, those that had expressed doubt or fear, echoed in her mind. The Zalrith, with their relentless emphasis on survival through domination. The Kelrith, masters of logic who saw humanity's capacity for unpredictability as a weakness. And then, the Trellex, who seemed to be reconsidering their stance but still spoke in the language of caution. She knew that they weren't the only species watching. News of the Rilax's change in behavior would ripple through the galaxy, reaching systems far beyond the Council's reach. The question of whether humanity could indeed broker peace between creatures as deadly as the Rilax would become a defining moment for her people. The galaxy would be watching, waiting to see if this was the true nature of humanity or just another temporary show of bravery that would fade when the next challenge arrived. Lila's mind wandered to her own crew, the soldiers and diplomats who had worked tirelessly to bring Earth's voice to the Council. They had never backed down, even when it seemed impossible. They had faced ridicule, suspicion, and outright hostility, yet they had stood firm. In that moment, when Lila had reached out to the Rilax, something had clicked, both for the Predator and for humanity. She could feel it in the air, the shift in the balance of power, but more importantly, the shift in perspective. Humanity was no longer the underdog. They were a force to be reckoned with. As she made her way toward the exit, the door slid open to reveal her communications officer, a young man named Jalen. His face was lit up by the soft glow of his data pad, his brow furrowed in concentration as he looked up at Lila. "Captain," he said, his voice crackling with urgency. "The Rilax has just left the chamber. It's headed back to its ship." Lila's heart skipped a beat. She had been expecting some follow-up discussion or perhaps another challenge, but she hadn't anticipated the Rilax's immediate departure. Was it a sign of rejection? Had they failed to convince it? Jalen's eyes widened as he quickly updated her on the situation. "There's more. The rest of the apex predators from other systems have begun to move. They've been gathering in sectors surrounding the Council. Some are circling in the neutral zone. Others are headed for Earth's coordinates." The news hit Lila like a jolt. Apex predators? There had been rumors, of course, whispers of creatures from various parts of the galaxy, beings who were as lethal as they were misunderstood. The fact that they were gathering now, in response to what she had done with the Rilax, could mean one of two things. Either they were preparing for an alliance, or they were positioning themselves to challenge humanity's new place in the galactic order. "Tell me everything you've got," Lila said, her voice steely with resolve. "If they're coming to Earth, we need to be ready." Jalen quickly relayed what he had gathered. There were ships, strange signatures, and strange movements that none of the Council members had anticipated. But what was most troubling was the silence. The predators were communicating with each other in ways that couldn't be traced, no signals, no direct contact. Only their movements indicated their intentions. "Captain, it could be a test," Jalen suggested. "A response to what we did today. They might want to see if we truly mean what we said about coexistence, or if we're too weak to back it up." Lila's mind raced, but she kept her calm. It had always been this way. A step forward into the unknown, with every victory bringing new challenges. The predators, whether they were the Rilax or others, were no different than the galaxy itself. All the species, in one form or another, had been shaped by their own survival instincts. Humanity had learned that much in their short time among the stars. But now, they had to prove that they were more than just a species that had survived. They had to prove that they could lead in a galaxy full of predators. She stood tall, her eyes narrowing in determination. Prepare for contact. We've shown them we're willing to work with their kind. Now we'll show them that humanity doesn't just survive. We lead. As the stars outside the council's window twinkled, Lila knew that this was just the beginning. The Predator's response could either strengthen humanity's place in the galaxy or shatter everything they had fought for. But she was ready. She had faced the fiercest threats humanity had ever known. She had made peace with the Rilax. Now it was time to face the rest of the galaxy, predators and all. And humanity would stand ready, not just to survive, but to thrive.